Okay, this lesson is on slope-intercept form and point-slope form. We're going to start with slope-intercept form. What this is it allows us to write equations if we are given the slope and the y-intercept. So the actual form is y equals mx plus b. Okay? Now, in this form, m is the slope. B is the y-intercept. Now remember that the y-intercept on the coordinate plane is always the ordered pair 0, comma, and whatever the y value is, I'm going to go ahead and say that the y value is b, because that's the variable we're using. Now what I also want you to remember is that up to this point, we have called slope the rate of change. And we've been calling the y-intercept the starting point. Okay? Now, when we look at this in terms of rate of change and starting point, I want you to realize that this is the exact same thing as the function rule that we have been writing. And if you remember, the function rule was the rate of change times the variable, plus the starting point. Alright, so we've already been using this form. We just didn't put a y equals in front of it. And instead of slope, we called it the rate. And instead of the y-intercept, we called it the starting point. So again, the concept isn't new. We're just making it a little bit more mathematical now. Alright, so let's go ahead and see how we use this. Example number 1, if I give you the equation y equals 4x plus 7, the slope in this equation is 4 because my slope up here in my form is always right in front of the x, and the 4 is right in front of the x in this equation. Does that make sense? Alright, so let's go ahead and make our M yellow. And let's make our B, what color? Let's make it purple. So in this equation down here, the 7 is not being multiplied by an x, so our y-intercept, I'm going to start abbreviating intercept, is 7. It's that simple. If we're given an equation, we can pull these two pieces of information out. Now, from here on out, slope, when we're asking for slope, you're going to see m equals blank, because we now know that that is the variable that we're going to use in this form. And b equals blank is going to be asking for the y-intercept. Okay? Alright, so let's try one. Example number 2 is y equals 3 halves x plus 12. So what I want you to do is I want you to find m and I want you to find b for the slope and the y-intercept. So hit pause, find it, and then turn it back on and I'll give you the answers. Okay, so 3 halves is in front of the x, so my slope is 3 halves, and 12 is the number not being multiplied by the x, so that is my y-intercept. Okay? Alright, let's do one more. Oops. Alright, what if I write this as y equals 12 plus 3 halves x? What's my slope and what's my y-intercept? Go ahead and pause it, write your answers down, and then turn it back on. Alright, what we need to notice here is that still our slope is always going to be right in front of the x, or the variable. And so even though I have switched the position, my slope is still 3 halves. And my y-intercept is still 12. So it's the same problem that we had in example 2. I just switched the position. Now, the other thing I want to make sure that you understand is slope-intercept form is always a y equals all by itself. If there was a 2 in front of that y, it would not be slope-intercept form because the y is not by itself. All right. Now, let's do example 4. Now, this one's going to look a little bit different because I want to show you how, regardless of how the problem is presented to us, the form still works the same way. So the slope is -7, and the y-intercept, and again I am abbreviating intercept, is 12. I want you to write an equation for this situation. Alright, now, it tells me that my slope is -7. It tells me that my y-intercept is 12. So, y equals -7x, because the slope always goes with the variable, plus 12. Does that make sense? Alright, so let's go ahead, let's do one more, and on this one, go ahead and pause it after you get it written down, or after I get it written down, and try to write the equation, then turn it back on and see if you did it correctly. So for this one, the rate of change is 7/5, and it goes through the point (0, 9). I want you to write the equation for this. Hit pause, write it, and then turn it back on. Okay, 7/5 is my slope, because remember, rate of change is the same thing as slope. Now, my y-intercept, this is the ordered pair for my y-intercept, but the only number I need for the equation is the 9. So your equation should be y equals 7/5 x plus 9. Okay? Alright, let's move on. Alright, so we've seen how useful that information can be to write an equation. Now let's see how useful the equation can be to graph. So if I give you the equation y equals 1/5 x plus 2, what is my slope? Well, 1/5 is being multiplied by the x, so m equals 1/5, and my y-intercept is 2, so b equals 2. Well, remember, this y-intercept is the same thing as the ordered pair 0, 2. So what you need to understand here is that the b is our first point to graph, or the first dot. Okay? My slope is going to give me the directions to get to the second dot. Okay? So I'm going to plot these in red. The first dot will go at 0, 2. Now from here, I want to get to my second dot from this dot I just put on here. So think of our slope. Remember, it's the same thing as rise over run. So think of this as saying go 1 block forward and then 5 blocks to the right. So I am going to go up 1 and go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that is where my second dot goes. Then I can draw a line through them, and that is the line of y equals 1/5 x plus 2. Alright, so let's go ahead and do another one. Y equals 2/3 x plus 1. I want you to hit pause, and I want you to try it, and then turn it on, and I'll walk through it and see if you did it right. Hit pause now. All right, so we have our slope and we have our y-intercept. I'm going to go ahead and write them down. M equals 2/3. B equals 1. Remember that is the point 0, 1. So this is my first point. So I'm going to put a dot right there. Let's go ahead and do it in blue. Now, my instructions tell me, or my directions tell me to go up 2 and to the right 3. So from this point, from my y-intercept, I'm going up 2 and to the right 3. You always do your directions from your last point. In this situation, it's from the y-intercept. Okay. Let's do another one. Alright, here's an equation. Y equals 4x minus 2. So let's think about this. If our slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, what does that negative 2 tell us about the y-intercept? So hit pause, attempt to graph this, and then turn it back on to see if you got it right. Alright, so my slope is the whole number 4, but we need a rise over run. What understood number always goes under a whole number? A 1, exactly. And our b here is going to be negative 2. So we should plot this point, then go up 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 1. Okay? Let's do one more. Alright, so we've got y equals negative 2/3 x plus 3. Hit pause, graph it, and then come back and see if you did it correctly. Okay, my y-intercept is 3, so I'm going to go ahead and plot that. 1, 2, 3. My instructions or directions are telling me now to go down 2 because of the negative, and to the right 3. So I'm going to go down 2 and to the right 3. Now, you may be asking, why didn't you go to the left 3? Because it's a negative. Well, so let me ask you this. If we go down 2 and to the left 3, that's going to be 2 negative positions. And 2 negative positions make a what? Or 2 negatives make a what? They make a positive. So if we had done 2 down and 3 to the left, we would have ended up with a positive relationship. But when we look at our slope, it's definitely a negative slope. Okay? Let's move on. Alright, now we're going to do a new form. We are going to do point slope. Now, that's when we are given a slope and some point other than the y-intercept. So slope-intercept form is when we're given the slope and we're given the intercept. Here is when we're given the slope and we're given some other ordered pair. Now, that equation, or that form, is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Now remember from our slope formula, when we do little subscript numbers, all that means is those are variables that we're actually going to substitute numbers in for. Alright, and our form just tells us this is where you're going to substitute the x and the y from the point that is given to us. Alright, now we know what the m means. The m is the slope, so when we're given the slope, it will go there. The fact that this y and this x don't have any subscript numbers, that means we are going to leave them as an x and a y in the equation. They're going to stay variables. Alright, so I'm going to get rid of all that color. Alright, so my first example is going to be m equals 4, and I'm going to give you the point 1, 2. Now, I'm going to go ahead, just like we did on our slope formula, I am going to label my x and my y as x1, y1. So, I'm going to bring down the y minus from my equation, My y1, I'm going to substitute in now. And that is the number 2 equals my m is given to me here, so I am going to plug in a 4 times x minus. I need my x1, which is the value 1. I'm going to draw a line right here because that's kind of running together. Alright, so at this point I have an equation with an x and a y. I just need to simplify now, and I want to put this, I want it to end up in slope-intercept form, that y equals mx plus b. Okay? So to do that, I need to get this y by itself. So I need to simplify everything I can first. So I am going to distribute this 4. I'm going to bring down my y minus 2 equals 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 1 is 4. Okay. If I'm going too fast, go ahead and hit pause. Make sure that you understand what I'm doing up to this point. Now I'm still wanting to get this y by itself. So to do that, I need to get rid of this minus 2. How do I get rid of a minus 2? I add 2. But I've got to add it to both sides. So this gives me 0, and I am left with just a y there. Equals, I've got to bring down my 4x. Negative 4 plus 2 is a negative 2. Now, the reason that I only added the 2 to that 4 is because negative 4 or minus 4 and positive 2 are like terms. Here, we have a 4x. 4x and 2 are not like terms, so you can't do that. Now, I have simplified this form into point-slope form, so now I can tell you that my slope is 4 and my y-intercept is negative 2, which means that I can now graph that equation, put a dot at negative 2, go up 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 1, and there's my line. Okay? So let's try another one. I'm going to put some more information up here. For example, number 7, I want you to hit pause and try to do it on your own, and then turn it on, and I'm going to quickly walk through it. When you turn it back on, hit pause if you need to make sure that you're understanding the process. Hit pause now. Alright, so I am going to go ahead and write my point-slope form down again so that I've got it right here in front of me. I strongly recommend you do that. I'm going to go ahead and label my x1, y1, and now I'm going to start substituting. Y minus, my y1 is 5, so I'm going to plug that in, equals m, my m is 3, plug that in, times x minus, my x1 is 2. Plug that in. So first thing we do is substitute. Second thing we're going to do is distribute, and I'm abbreviating here. 3 times x, 3 times minus 2. Y minus 5 equals 3x minus 6. Now I want to get the y by itself, so I'm going to add 5 to both sides of the equal sign. And I get y equals 3x minus 1. So my slope is 3. My y-intercept is negative 1. And I could graph this, putting my first dot at negative 1, going up 1, 2, 3, and over 1. Now remember, the reason I've gone over 1 on both this example and example 6 is because that whole number has an understood 1 underneath it. So it's 3 up and 1 to the right. Alright, let's do another one. Alright, here's the next example. We've got one more like this, and then I've got one last example of a problem that's a little bit different, and then we'll be done. Alright, so I want you to hit pause. I want you to try plugging this in and going through the process. Now remember, the reason we're having to go through this process is because this ordered pair right here is not the y-intercept. When you plot this point, it's not going to be on the y-axis. Okay, so hit pause, turn it back on, and see if you've done it correctly. Alright, I am going to write my equation, or my equation again. I'm always going to do that so that it's right there in front of me. I've got x1 and y1 there. So y minus 4 equals 1/2 times x minus 10. This is where I distribute. I'm going to go ahead and bring my y minus 4 down. 1/2 times x is 1/2 x. Remember, anytime you multiply a number times a variable, you just put them side by side like that, which indicates multiplication. And then 1/2 times 10, well, what is half of 10? Exactly, it's 5. So we're going to add 4 and add 4. That makes 0, so I have y equals 1/2 x minus 1. Just keeps working out that my y-intercepts are minus 1. I don't know why I did that. Alright, let's go to the next page and do our last example. Now remember, you can email me if you have questions. This last one, we're going to do that same process we've been doing, but we've got to add one little step at the beginning. So we want to write an equation given the point 2,5 and the point, I think I'm going to change this, 710. I'm going to see if that one works out a little bit better. I've been having issues with my slope. Alright, so what's different here? I didn't give you a slope. The question is, can we find a slope with the information that we're given? Well, we've been given 2 points. Do we know how to find a slope with 2 points? Well, by George, yes we do. We can find the slope with the equation, or the formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's do that. First, let's label these x1, y1, x2, y2. So, y2 is 10 minus y1 is 5. x2 is 7 minus x1 is 2. 10 minus 5 is 5. 7 minus 2 is 5. And that gives me a beautiful slope of 1. Now, I have my slope. And what were we doing on the last example? What were we given? We were given the slope and a point. Well, I have a point right there. So let's go ahead and use the point 2,5. Now your question may be, how do you know which point to use? Honestly, it doesn't matter. You can do the same process with the point 710 and you're still going to end up with the same equation. Now, since this now is the information that we've been given for the last 3 examples, you should be able to work this out. I'm going to go ahead and go through it with you one last time. So I'm going to write down my y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And now I'm going to start plugging in. Let's go ahead and label this again. Oops. x1, y1. So y minus y1 is 5 equals m is 1, times x minus x1 is 2. Okay, now just one last time I want to be sure that we see where all this is coming from. m, x1, x1. Okay, so that's why I am putting these specific numbers in these specific places. Okay? Alright, so I am going to distribute. So bring down my y minus 5 equals 1 times x is 1x, 1 times 2 is 2. And I'm going to add 5 to both sides so I can get my y by itself, because it has to be by itself to be in slope-intercept form. And I end up with y equals x plus 3. So my slope here is 1, and my y-intercept is 3. So good luck on the assignment, and just keep going back through it until you're comfortable with the process. Good night.